Hi, everyone. It's good to see you, and hopefully for the next, you'll be tuned in for the next 3 weeks after that, and we can get to know each other more. So we're going to start off with a challenge, and it's really important that with this challenge that you do it, and it's going to set up us for the rest of the workshop. So we're just going to screen share a math question, so if you can just make it a little bit bigger if possible, but you guys will work it out. Like, I know you guys are super young and tech savvy, so this is what we're gonna do. This math equation, I want you to figure it out and figure out how to post it in the chat, the answers, and we're gonna start now, and you have 10 seconds, okay? So let's go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and I'll give you an extra second. Okay, we're good, we're done. So put your answers in the chat, and whoever gets it correct gets to continue. Okay. Hopefully you would have found out that that's not a real thing. But let's just take a moment to either like close your eyes or just lower your gaze if that's comfortable for you, and just imagine how that would be, how you would feel if you were put under that constraint. Or maybe you're feeling like that now. So imagine you went through that and it really mattered to you that you had to get it correct. Otherwise there would be like a big consequence. And if you can come up with one word or a short phrase of how you are feeling being put through that. And we're going to give you a Menti link where you can write out those words. You might even notice going through that, what was in your thoughts. Like, is this girl for real? Maybe you notice how your body was feeling. Did your heart rate start to go up a bit? Did you get nervous? What was that experience like? So some people answered in the chat box. I'm seeing anxious. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, nervous, frustrated. Someone wrote confused as well in the chat box. So I don't know about you, but from a person who is, are you mad? Right? Are you crazy? Upset? Yeah. Pressured? Yeah. Dizzy? So that physical sensation. Yeah, so that's like a bodily sensation that you're bringing up of how you would feel. It's just a little bit small. So stressed. Yeah. So I would feel stressed too. Because
we also have, I felt anxious and I felt a bunch of pressure that I needed to get that done in time. And if I didn't, I would be in big trouble.
Yeah. So that expectation, that pressure, and stress, all the things that you are writing in this experience is physical sensations and feelings, emotional feelings that could be caused because of stress. And even saying it out loud was stressing me because math is not my thing at all, and to be doing it under that time constraint, right? So I just want to talk a little bit about like what is stress, and how do you know when you're stressed, right? And maybe it's some of these, you can put your answers if you want in the chat box as well for this one, because a lot of what you wrote, we had a separate question, but a lot of what you wrote really connects right back to what you wrote. So you've been able to identify some of those things of how you're feeling, and that's connected to stress. You start to feel anxious, you start to feel nervous, dizzy. All of those things are a part of what it's like to be stressed, or to know. It could be an indicator how you know you're stressed?
There's another mentee.
Mhm. So if you guys want to add to that, like for yourself personally, how do you know when you're stressed? What does it mean for you? Mhm. Having that mind, that question going on, feeling tense, that physical sensation of tenseness, for sure. I'm just gonna go feeling lost. I'm just checking in with the chat, so people are answering there as well. Nervous. Yeah. I connect with that too. Nervous. Awesome. So you guys are already showing me that you are able to identify when you're stressed, some of the feelings are coming up. Like I'm feeling tight. I start to feel nervous. Maybe the thoughts are like you don't feel good about yourself. You feel inadequate or lost. Like you don't know what to do about it.
So in mentee, we have headaches, heart pounds, head feels like brain is swelling and dizzy, overwhelmed and hopeless. That feeling in the pit of your stomach. Stress to me is feeling pressured and not being able to take it off when I get stressed and angry and sweaty and I don't feel like talking to anyone.
I totally feel that stomach pit one. Whoever said that one, man, butterflies and nausea.
Yeah, that was me before signing in here to speak with y'all. That's great. It really, you are able to describe the physical sensations is what I'm hearing, and also like what are some behaviors that you guys do when stress is happening and how that feels. So thank you for sharing. That's awesome. So just to go into stress a little bit more and to break down like what we can identify and know why we're stressed, but like what's actually happening in our body. We're gonna kind of go into that a little bit. So first, there is good stress. Believe it or not, there is good stress. So I'm gonna talk about that a bit. And that is, I like to think of it as growth. It's like that good growth stress. So you might have those feelings coming up about like anxiousness, that butterfly in your stomach, those things, but you're still able to kind of function through the rest of your day. It doesn't change your typical behaviors, right? So an example of that could be like when you get a job, like a new job, and it's your first day at work and you're by yourself. So you might feel a little bit of stress and a little bit anxiousness about that situation, right? But you also can have access to your mind and talk to yourself about it and say, you know what, I am feeling stressed, but like I got the training. I know that when I get to work, this employee is gonna be there, and we like got along. She can help me out. So they can help me out. I have support at work, so I know I can manage. So despite the feelings and the thoughts that are happening in this stress part, the good stress, you're still able to go to work, get through it, maybe have some like challenges, some mistakes, but you're still able to work your way through, and you get to the end of your shift and you feel like, hey, I did a decent job. I was still able to like figure things out despite the feelings that were present, right? And that could also be a test, right? Like an exam, for example, you might feel those sensations, but you're still able to show up to class, do the exam. You're still able to like recall. You can look at the answers or the questions and think and problem solve and come up with the exam answers, and you get through the exam and you are still able to function. So that's like kind of like the good stress. It's challenging, and it helps you grow because you're learning while you're doing it. You're developing other skills while you're doing it. But it's new, which is sometimes why it's stressful for you, right? Or for people. And it could be like at a tournament. Maybe there's a basketball tournament that's coming up, and that you might feel a little bit stressed, or a dance recital, a performance of some sort, and you might get those feelings. but you're still able to get through it. You're still able to function and you work through. Does that make sense? I think that's a good type of stress where you can algebra. Yeah, that would be for me too. Like, no. But even my math class, just to go there for a moment, I was blessed that I had a really good teacher who cared and supported and gave me that extra tools. And even though I knew that wasn't my strong spot, because I had that support and I was able to navigate through my stress because I knew that I could do it, right? If it's algebra and you know that you can't, like, you don't feel confident in that, and then it might be going into a different type of stress, which we're gonna talk about soon, right? So going into what makes stress good, really good question. So what makes stress good is that you can learn from it. So even if you make a mistake and it doesn't feel good and you're kind of stressed about it, if you can still have access to parts of your brain where you can see what's happening and learn from it, like, okay, I know I made this mistake here, but I can do this next time, or I will work on doing this in a different way, and you can grow from it. So even going to the example about like work, your first day at the job, you could feel that stress, but you're still able to go in, you learn from it, and the next day you feel a little bit more confident, and you're kind of grown in that way. Like, this is not as stressful anymore because I worked through that stress. It was manageable, it was there, but I got through it, and I can now learn and grow and be resilient and take from that information of my experience and continue to apply it to whatever comes my way. Yes, that's a beautiful quote and an example that pressure creates the diamond. So thank you for sharing that. So that's really another analogy of it.
Can I add to that for a second?
Yeah.
And when I was dealing with, I deal with anxiety and panic attacks sometimes, and I watched a YouTube video, and this one guy said that there is no difference between anxiety and stress versus excitement. The actual biological effects that it has on your body are the exact same. So he's like, instead of saying I'm stressed or I'm anxious, why not say I'm excited? Which was interesting.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that, Terrence. We're gonna get to that. So,
oh, cool.
But you're totally right. It is the same activation in the mind and in the body. It's just, what is your perspective on it? So we're gonna talk about that a little bit more. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. So going to the other side of it now, a little bit of what bad stress is, and it's often what we commonly like focus on, that stress is not good for us, it's bad, would be labeled as like chronic or toxic stress. And just for time's sake, I just want to check in with what's happening in the chat here.
Oh, Joshua was just saying a few things. I was just reiterating. So I don't know if I was one of the first days on work super stressed, I would shit myself from diarrhea.
Yeah.
Beep. I don't know if I'll edit it up, because that sounds wrong. I just agreed. That actually happened to me one time on the first day of work.
Yeah. We're going to end, for me, it wasn't the number 2 shit. It was like, whoa, the other one. But you know what? Just because of time's sake and where the discussion is, we're going to go right into a video that talks a bit about what's coming up. Like, am I nervous and I feel like I have to like shoot myself right now? And it breaks it down. So if you could please, that first link of that video that I sent you, if you could watch that, and it's gonna explain and help us understand like what's happening in our body, because our bodies have a stress response system. And it's gonna break down what that is.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. The mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result, we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects. At Tankyboxen, you can learn both bottom-up and top-down techniques to reduce false FFF activation and bring your body back to balance.
So I'm going to just talk a little bit more to give some details, but I forgot to say that the FFS, like what is that? So our body has a stress response system. And so I was talking about that good stress before, where like, okay, I can manage through this. You can still have your perspective, you can still function, all of those things. So the video talked about that a little bit. And then on the other side, where it is that chronic stress or toxic stress, I just want to explain a little bit more about what's happening in the brain. So we're just going to use my hand, simple explanation of a brain model for the hand. So this is going to be a brain, and we're going to center around or talk about two parts of our brain. So we're just going to open it up, and we're going to talk about our back brain, which is my thumb here, and that's the stress response system. So when we're feeling like really heightened stress, our responses are to like fight our way through it, to run away, or to freeze, just like we talked about in the video. I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. And that's, again, our emotional center as well. And our front brain, which is the top of my fingers here, is where we have our perspective, where we can communicate, we can reason, and logic exist here. And we have like our awareness in this section. And they work together. So in that normal stress range, this center, where the fight, flight, and freeze and our emotions are, it could be talking to the brain saying, oh my gosh, I'm stressed, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And then the top brain could be like, don't worry, I got it, I can see, I got some perspectives. Remember all the studying that you did, the pre-test you did, you got it. You got through your first shift at work already, so you can get through the second shift. You practice. This brain talks to this one, and they work together. It's like, is something, should I be worried right now? Do I need to be safe? No, you're good, you're good. Do I need to be safe? Okay, activation. I'm safe now. That gets just a quick idea of what's happening here, all right? So in the video that we saw, you might have noticed like a lot of animal imagery. And so this part, that fight, flight, and freeze, that is great when you are like back in the days where we didn't have no frills to get food. And you know, this might be in the hunting and gathering back when we were in that part of life, right? Or if there is a bear, like if you go camping and you need to figure out like, what do I need to do? I'm unsafe right now. The body's gonna shut down all those other organs that are not necessary, and that energy is gonna go to running and making sure I have all of my like that adrenaline is going, and I can escape, or I have to fight and I'm gonna win. You know, those panic situations where like you might hear of a person flipping over a car or something, or lifting at a car. That's this making that capable, right? But that's not meant for like daily activation. That's for specific moments. But in life, there's a lot of people that have chronic or toxic stress, right? But it's not a bear. So I just am curious to know, what are your thoughts? What would be an example, like a practical, like something that happens in our daily life that could cause chronic or toxic stress? So I think we have a mentee about this, and you can think about maybe it's something personal that you've experienced, or maybe it's something you've witnessed, right? Like, oh, my friend was in a really, this happened to them and they were in chronic stress for a while, and this is what they did. So I'm just gonna give you a chance what is an example of chronic stress? Like in 2020, what is stressing people out? What is causing them to come into chronic or toxic stress?
For new folks who haven't done the Mentee yet, you basically, on a computer or your phone, you go to mentee.com, as it says there at the top, and then it'll ask you for a code. You enter that code that you see there, 294258. For those who can't see the screen, so you go to mentee.com, menti.com, put in the code 294258.
If you're not comfortable with using Mentee, or it's hard to flip between Zoom and Mentee on your phone, feel free to use the chat.
Mm-hmm. Waking up early stresses you out. Yeah. Oh, for work. But do you still go to work? I guess that's my question now. Like, if you're able to still get there, that's in your normal stress range, right? Most likely, I'm making a presumption. But I want to hear, I'll see what everyone else, Devika, if you could read out to me. I don't know why I can't see it. I can see the bubbles coming up, but I can't see it in detail.
Okay, so for on Mentee, I gotta move my screen around as well. Okay, so the question is, what do you think is chronic or traumatic stress? And we have constantly being drilled and told I'm not good enough, or stupid, or lazy.
Mm-hmm.
There's uncertainty with COVID, stress that affects daily life, failing a test, assignment, or course, traumatic events that constantly have to think about, that can cause a lot of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you read that first bubble again for me?
Sure, one more. I have to move my little screen around.
Okay.
A death of a loved one
Yeah.
just popped up, and the first one is constantly being drilled and told I'm not good enough, stupid, or lazy.
So some of what you're already bringing up and describing would be trauma, and that can be, like you just said, I would constitute that as like verbal abuse, like constantly telling yourself that you're down. That would bring up for sure into that chronic stress activation, because it's a form of abuse, a form of trauma. Loss of somebody, absolutely, absolutely can bring that up. So you guys are right on track. And I also want to add that it could be like one thing. So for example, if you are in the care of somebody, a family member that has a mental illness, for example, and typically like you're good, like you can handle that, you're that's a part of your life, and you know the tools and the things, and you have a system to work through it, so you can be in that, and then something else happens at work, or a loss, or something else that you've said on top of that, and that's an added stressor and an added stressor, and that can be, so it can be a buildup of different stressors that become too much for our stress response system, and it's like an overload. So if you think about it as a bridge, and there's too much things on the bridge, so it just collapses, if that makes sense. And another thing, it could be from hearing from other people. So maybe you're hearing about this event or this situation that's happened, and I'll share an example that got me on a bit of the chronic stress was the news and Facebook. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I was hearing a lot about the young man who was jogging and he got shot. And then after that, there was another situation with a woman, a young Black woman, went to their house looking for somebody else, and then she got shot. So for me, hearing those stories and identifying there's some connection with these people for me, and seeing on my Facebook, the feed over and over and over, seeing stories of this, hearing the comments that were happening and seeing it on the news, I started to have some activation. And it wasn't until I went to bed, and my normal routine, I would go to bed, I would sleep, and I'm up at like 2, 3 in the morning, and I can't sleep. So that was an indicator, like, what is happening? It's outside of my like normal habit, my normal function, which would be in my normal stress range, and it wasn't in that. I couldn't sleep, and I had to take a moment and just like sit up, take a breath, and think about, just kind of reflect for a moment and identify what was going on. And I was able to see, I'm like, you know, I'm actually really stressed out about all of this. And what I did was I took some time to write a letter. So I got out of bed, I got my phone, and I just started to write a note. And I wrote, so a form of connection is what can get you out of that stress response. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So I started writing, and I was just getting all of the stuff that I was feeling. I was getting it out through writing, and also the physical action, the movement of writing is helpful as well. And the breath, breathing. And because I was writing to somebody, I was writing to a group of incarcerated youth that I work with, that I connected to with the circumstance and also just personally. And then I was able, because I had that sense of connection, I was able to write it out. I took some time to breathe. I was able to, I felt my nervous system start to relax a little bit. So trauma and could look like that. Lots of things are seeing it from the outside. So I'm just gonna go back to my hand model here for a second. So this part, as we recall, that's that fight, flight, and freeze, and this is the perspective aspect. Now, if you're down here, and this is like active all the time, it's like a muscle. That part of your brain is a muscle, and you're pumping, doing whatever, push-ups, and you're working that muscle. So that stress response system, that fight, flight, and freeze, if that's active all the time, that gets really strong, right? And that can actually overtake our front brain here, where we have that perspective, communication, reasoning, awareness, because this has been working so much, and it's working to stay safe and looking out for things. It can flip, and this takes control. This starts to be the lead of everything that we do through this lens. Does that make sense? Because that muscle's been working really, really hard.
So I just want to jump in for folks who can't see. I don't know, because there were some folks on the phone. Basically, the analogy is if you open up your hand, your thumb folded in, that's the part of your brain that's the emotional, anxious part, and your fingers folded over is the top part of your brain that helps rationalize over. Mm-hmm. So overworking your thumb muscle, then it would dominate and be stronger than the rest of it.
Yeah. And so say we were here, how the HELL are we gonna get back to here? Is the question.
How the hell?
So from my example, I said was breathing in slowly, exhale slowly. Things that are rhythmic and movement can help calm the nervous system, and also because in the nervous system there are hormones that are sent out, and movement helps process those hormones. So going for a run, things like that. If you ever had a moment at school and the teacher was like, go for a walk, and then you could come back and kind of like talk about things after, that movement aspect of it can help. Connection can help. Appropriate touch can help. And once this area, this part of the brain starts to feel a bit safe, like, okay, I think I'm okay now, I can start to relax a little bit, and slowly the top brain, where it has that reasoning, can come talk to the brain, to the bottom brain, and they're back in communication. And we're going to be doing some tools to work on how do you get that access back soon. Okay.
Before we move on, I just want to anyways. Mary said, getting my meningococcal shot vaccine, that creates stress. Also, JLC said, in the last year, I have lost 3 family members that were close to me and gone through a heartbreak. It was super stressful dealing with that and school.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And that's what we were talking about earlier when I was saying, like, one thing after another, and that's what you're describing right now. So my heart goes out to you. But we're gonna give you some tools to hopefully manage those things so you can come back into your normal response. But that would definitely trigger your. It could. I can't speak for you, but it could trigger your fight, flight, or freeze activation in the brain. So I just want to show a slide quickly, and then we're gonna move on, just so we can see the components. So the window of tolerance, if you could screen share that for me, in the slides where they have the wiggly lines. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank you. The fact that you're here, from JLC, and are able to like get in community shows strength and resilience. So thank you for being open and sharing that. That means a lot. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so just going to the screen. So the first part here, if you look at the line that goes in between the red wiggles, that would be our like baseline. That's where we're pretty good in terms of our stress. Like we're not feeling stressed, we're good. But then we might feel stress and it kind of goes up, and then it goes back to that baseline. Like, I'm good, up, and I'm back good. And that was that kind of that good stress, that growth stress that I was talking about. And then the second one, you can see that it goes a little bit like higher, right? And it's not touching the baseline where you feel like you're good and you can handle, and you're in your typical place, and can be creative and all those things. This is less access to that top brain that we were talking about, and getting into that flight fight activation. And if you go at the bottom here, that window of tolerance, here, you can see that the lines are going like very, very high or very, very low, but they're not really touching the baseline. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, because this is where our flight, fight, or freeze activation is living now in this graph here at the bottom. And so the top represents that fight or flight part of the activation in the stress response system. And that could look like hyperactivity, like you're really, or hyper vigilance, you're on guard, kind of looking around and making sure like that nothing's going to happen to you. You might feel like increased sensations, like what we were talking about before, the heart racing, like, but to an extreme. You might feel like the need to control everything. You might feel like angry. It might be like, have you ever been in a circumstance where you just like snap at someone, or like just go away in a not nice way? You might have been in that activation there, that fight or flight activation, and you might have like big startle responses, or like very, very tense, and it's hard to kind of communicate clearly because we're in that range where you don't have that access to that front brain as much, like where you can have perspective, you can kind of see and problem solve and all of that. And then it goes really down low, and that would be in like that freeze response, where you might be shutting down a bit. So you might feel like super, super, super tired, for example. So like the traumatic stress or chronic stress, or sorry, to say toxic stress is activated, and you would, instead of your normal, I'm going to go home, I'm going to watch my favorite show or be on Instagram, like, and you can interact with your family members. That doesn't happen. Maybe you're going home and you're going straight to bed and you're just sleeping, right? So you could be really lethargic. You could be kind of dissociating from people, have an underreaction to things. So like there might be a safety thing, and you're like, it doesn't matter, or maybe not really feeling like a numbness could be in the freeze sense, that sensation, and maybe not really feeling pain, for example. So great question. I hope that we're going to be able to talk about that. So just in the chat, someone asked, is that like the difference between depression and anxiety? So stress is definitely can be connected to stress and anxiety or depression when it gets to that chronic stage. Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna hopefully we'll chat about the connection a little bit more, but yes. Okay. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of like, okay, this is normal. This is what's happening in my body, and it's kind of on the flip side. We think about it in a negative way most time, because we're these what we talked about, that activation is present, and we're feeling anxious or on guard or all those things. But let's go back to thinking about how stress is good for you. So I just want to go to another video. Davika, if you could get that prepped, that would be awesome. And so those I skipped ahead, but those activations of the fight, flight, or freeze, that happens when we are in like a state of overwhelm. So I just want you to think about for a moment, what does overwhelm mean for you? Like, what does that mean? You can just quickly put your answers in the chat if you want to share, but just reflect, like, what does overwhelmed mean? Yeah, can't handle it. Like an overflowing cup. That's a good imagery for that. Yeah. Pressure to do well. I'm just reading some of the chat responses. Yeah. So a feeling like I can't handle it, like it's too much. It's too much. It's just coming up and I can't contain it, right? You know, oh, perfect. Unable to have control over a negative series of events. So yeah, your fight, flight, or freeze would be activated in that sense, and feeling like no control. So I just want to go back to, it's good to know what these things are, and know what's happening in your body, because then you can use some tools to help you manage. And we're going to come to that. But first, I want to show this video that Davika has. And you might, the first little intro might sound familiar to you from what we did in our check-in. But when you're ready, Davika, you can go ahead and share that for me. That would be awesome.
I've changed my mind about stress. This study tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. And they started by asking people, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? And then they used public death records to find out who died. People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including people who had relatively little stress. Can changing how you think about stress make you healthier? And here the science says yes. When you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. It's called the social stress test. Now, if you were actually in this study, you'd probably be a little stressed out. Your heart might be pounding, you might be breathing fast, or maybe breaking out into a sweat. And normally we interpret these physical changes as anxiety or signs that we aren't coping very well with the pressure. What if you viewed them instead as signs that your body was energized, preparing you to meet this challenge? Now that is exactly what participants were told in a study conducted at Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. The most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy and courage. Over a lifetime of stressful experiences, this one biological change could be the difference between a stress-induced heart attack at age 50 and living well into your 90s. How you think about stress matters. Hopefully, the next time your heart is pounding from stress, you're going to remember this talk and you're going to think to yourself, this is my body helping me rise to this challenge. And when you view stress in that way, your body believes you and your stress response becomes healthier. Stress makes you social. Oxytocin is a neurohormone. It fine-tunes your brain's social instincts. It primes you to do things that strengthen close relationships, makes you crave physical contact with your friends and family. It enhances your empathy. It even makes you more willing to help and support people you care about. But here's what most people don't understand about oxytocin. It's a stress hormone. And when oxytocin is released in the stress response, it is motivating you to seek support. When life is difficult, your stress response wants you to be surrounded by people who care about you. Oxytocin also acts on your body, and one of its main roles in your body is to protect your cardiovascular system from the effects of stress. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. It also helps your blood vessels stay relaxed during stress, and oxytocin helps heart cells regenerate and heal from any stress-induced damage. This stress hormone strengthens your heart. All of these physical benefits of oxytocin are enhanced by social contact and social support. So when you reach out to others under stress, either to seek support or to help someone else, you release more of this hormone, your stress response becomes healthier, and you actually recover faster from stress. This study tracked about 1,000 adults in the United States, and they started the study by asking, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, how much time have you spent helping out friends, neighbors, people in your community? For every major stressful life experience, like financial difficulties or family crisis, that increased the risk of dying by 30%. But people who spent time caring for others showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying, 0. How you think and how you act can transform your experience of stress. When you choose to view your stress response as helpful, you create the biology of courage. And when you choose to connect with others under stress, you can create resilience. You're saying that you can trust yourself to handle life's challenges, and you're remembering that you don't have to face them alone. One thing we know for certain is that chasing meaning is better for your health than trying to avoid discomfort. And so I would say that's really the best way to make decisions, is go after what it is that creates meaning in your life, and then trust yourself to handle the stress that follows.
Great. So I will post the full video of that for anyone who's interested in watching all of it. There's some really interesting things and great tools in there that you can have access to. So perspective, and that brings us into mindfulness. So if you, there's a slide, we could put up that, I think it's like the bluey one that has all of the benefits of what mindfulness is. But I just want to talk about that for a bit, because mindfulness, mindful movement, and mindful activities is something that really transformed my life, and it connects directly to what we've talked about before about using breath to calm down the nervous system.
Which one did you want? Sorry.
Oh, the one that talks about mindfulness. It has a whole bunch of facts about why it can be helpful.
The
and
PowerPoint?
Yeah, from the slide. Yeah. Yeah, so from my own personal experience, by being mindful, so going back a little bit, I was doing I have a background also in theater, and perfect. So in that we have movement classes, movement exploration. We have one-on-one movement sessions with my teacher. And I knew that I had tension in my back. So we were being mindful about that in the moving, because they ask you, okay, what do you want to work on? I said, okay, we'll work on tension in my lower back because I know that it's there. Let's figure out what that is. So being mindful and paying attention and actively trying to release some of the tension there, in that moment, instantly I started crying. I was bawling. But what I came to know by being mindful and paying attention to how I was feeling emotionally too, I knew exactly. I was like, oh, I was holding loss there. My boyfriend at the time when I was in high school passed away, and I was in that fight, flight, or freeze activation for a very long time, and I was affecting my body, and I was holding tension in my lower back. And through mindful movement practices, I was able to release that tension, and I like bawled, but I knew exactly what it was coming from. And then I went and got support by seeing a counselor. I just once, and I just talked it through, and I was starting to be able to get back to me. That wasn't leading that like stress response of fight, flight, or freeze for me, and that tension in my back was no longer leading my life. And that was like a mind-blowing realization for me, that our bodies are connected to our emotions, and by being mindful and paying attention, that I can have some control over that. I can have an awareness and then choose what do I want to do about it. So that's a big reason that started my shift into meditative practice, yoga, mindful movement, and all of that stuff. So getting back to mindfulness and the definition of what is mindfulness. And some people might think that, or think of yoga and like, oh, I have to sit down cross-legged and like meditate. But you can be mindful in many, many different ways. And mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose. So, and in the present moment. You're just being present with what your thoughts are, what physical sensations that you might feel, like tingling, or that heart rate that we talked about before, the breathing, and just like paying attention to like what is happening in this moment? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And being just neutral about it in a way. There's no judgment. It's just, this is what's happening in my body and my mind at this moment. There's no, oh, I'm feeling really stressed and like I shouldn't feel like this, and just getting kind of going down that mind train of thought. And it's just being present of, I'm feeling this in my body and it feels like this, or or it could be the opposite, like this feels really, really good. And it's also not attaching to that. It's just noticing like what is happening presently, and just not being judgment about it, not being there's no judgment on that. So it's kind of just paying attention and getting to know you more from a different perspective. And when you practice mindfulness, it actually connects to that front brain axis, and is a way to like build that front brain muscle by being mindful, by being able to see the whole picture, right? And just to notice things and being curious about what's happening in your life right now. That accesses the front brain and actually starts building it up even more. And it can help with stress, which is why we're talking about that now. It can help support managing stress, anxiety, all these things, can help reduce it. So this is why we're talking about it.
Nathan asked a question. So what if we start to think of a stress as a good, now it switched around, hold on, where we go? Stress as a good thing, and then we don't want to get rid of it. I think there's some people that thrive off of that. And I think there's, just like everything in life, there's varying degrees, right? And you don't want to be from one extreme to the other. You want to find that balance. So you could have someone who's extremely anxious and stressful all the time. That's one extreme. Then the other extreme would be someone who is like highly addicted to the adrenaline and the hormones that are released when you're having this excitement / stress.
For sure. And some people, like I know people who say they thrive on stress. They'll be in like, they'll wait last minute to get all of the assignments done, but they get it done through all that stress.
Yeah, that's my life.
But it still taxes the body. Yes. And in the moment, or while they're doing it, I have another slide. We'll just put it up quickly to be of the body and how stress impacts the body. So even if they're using that adrenaline just to get through, so I would say that's that fight activation. We're getting through that stress moment, and we're fighting our way through, but it still has a negative impact on the body. And like Terrence said, it's about having that balance. So how can I work through that situation and get and thrive despite being feeling stress? So it's like, how can I do that versus continually staying in that fight, flight, freeze activation, which is damaging, and even it can be damaging to the body. And so on that slide, it says some of the ways that it can be harmful. There can cause digestion issues. We talked about the tummy already, but can hinder how the body absorbs nutrients in your body, right? And that can become an issue. You can have cause high blood pressure, for example, and a whole bunch of other things. But there are tools out there to manage. So if someone notices that they're in that state of like thriving on that fight activation, that fight, freeze of like, and getting addicted to it, going back to the question, mindfulness can start to bring that awareness of, oh, I'm feeling this right now. It takes time. It's not a magic pill and you understand, like, I'm just going to do one meditation and I'm good. It takes practice. It's like doing push-ups for this part of the brain. And eventually, by being intentional and being mindful and curious about, why do I do a certain thing, or what is my instinct, and where am I comfortable in that activation? Because that can be comfortable, right? When your bottom brain takes over and is in this perspective, it's what it knows best sometimes. You feel real comfortable here, and going to this one is new. And it's like going back to not square one, but you're building that a little bit stronger, and so it's can feel new, and it can feel, if you think about learning anything new in life, it can be challenging and it can be uncomfortable. But going back to that normal stress range, you can feel uncomfortable and still work your way through it. You can still feel the things, notice without judgment what's happening in your body, and then access that part of the brain and your mind, and can have an awareness to it, can say, oh, I'm feeling like this right now. That's interesting. It's starting to get to the point of overwhelm, like we were talking before. I'm gonna just stop for a moment and come out, or shake out, or run, or write it out, journal, like I was talking before, what I did from my perspective. So I hope that answers your question. And we've done a lot of talking and even this subject, hearing about it, we're taking a lot of information right now, and it might even start to feel like too much. So I just want to take a break, a stretch break, and wherever you are, if you're seated or if you're standing, just notice your feet on the ground or where it's in contact with. Lengthen your spine, sit up nice and tall. Close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever's more comfortable to you. And just bring your attention to your breath for a moment. And see if you can come up with one word with how you're feeling right now. Just checking in with yourself. And when you're ready, you have that word, you can either open up your eyes or bring up your gaze. And we're just gonna inhale and exhale, just roll out the shoulders a little bit. Nice, and let's go in the other direction. So coming forward, rolling the shoulders. And just notice what that feels like in your body. Yeah, Taryn's gonna do that next. Inhale, just reach your hands over your head. Just take a moment, stretch up, do whatever feels good for you. Just stretch or shake it out. We've been sitting for me, so whatever your body is calling you to do, just take 10 more seconds to stretch it out. No pressure on these 10 seconds this time around. So 10, stretch, 9, 8, do whatever feels good for your body. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're gonna come back.